can we start? We can start, all right. Welcome everybody. Just for those people that are out viewing in Zoom land or YouTube land, we're having some technical difficulties with our camera. So tonight we're going to do a radio broadcast, YouTube radio. So all you're going to hear is us talking. You won't be able to see us. So at this time at 6:08 p.m., I will call the regular city council meeting for Moab City to order on April 26, 2022. And the first item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance, and I'm going to ask Carrie Bailey to lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Carrie. First item is Citizens Be Heard. And Sarah?
Yes, hi. Sorry, my dog's out in the car, so I have to. I wanted to talk about the Scots on the Rocks. I think it's a great event, but it doesn't belong in the ballpark. It's too robust and big and noisy an event, and it's unfair to really compare it to the folk festival that's 16 years with a very mellow, not constant noisy vibe. And I was looking at the site about the heavy athletic competition with the caber toss, which is throwing a huge tree trunk or tree and making it spin and hit the ground. The hammer toss, weight for distance, and a stone put that all sound highly damaging and potentially dangerous in that smaller spot. The noise is almost nonstop. I heard it from my house at the end of Center Street. I don't really care about myself. I worry about wildlife, other humans, and just the general tranquility of our neighborhoods. So I think it's a great event. I'm Scots-Irish. On my mother's side, I'm a McLeod. So it's not a cultural deprivation thing, but I just think it's better suited for a larger venue that has better facilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Now I'm off to Lions Park to maintain the recycle bin.
Good job.
I'll send you a picture.
All right, Carrie.
I am not a good speaker. I'm going to have to read. I would say that I have sent several emails to you guys about the Scots on the Rock and that, but today I want to talk about the Center Street Ballpark. I live across the street from the Center Street Park, and so I know there is a constant use of these facilities by the local community. I can also tell you that the ballpark has been sorely neglected. Heavy chain link gates are swinging open, blown by the winds because latches have been broken off for years. Shade cloth and protective netting for spectators in the children's playground is lying torn on the ground. Expensive equipment for specific sports is left outside throughout the year to deteriorate. Playing fields are not leveled or stabilized. Drought-affected turf fields are barely surviving because recent events, like the Scots on the Rocks, are allowed to drive and park vehicles all over the park with no plan or oversight to preserve the fields or protect the now damaged irrigation system. This spring, when hundreds were using the park for youth soccer and youth softball practice, one lone porta potty was available for all those people to use. The overhead field lights in the park are in serious need of maintenance and repair or even replacement. Some of the lights now are not functioning, directed upward to the sky, broken, and even in danger of falling to the ground. I can't help but comment that this is so inconsistent with our city's Dark Sky Initiative and our proximity to our beloved National Park's dark skies. Adding another event without strict management is a mistake. Maintaining and repairing our park's infrastructure for local citizens by the city would be more welcome than promoting more events in neighborhoods in town where many of us live. I've got a paragraph on here about use right now, and I'd ask you guys to look at the numbers at the ballpark, the Sun Court, the gym. There's roller skaters and soccer players. Every night there's joyful soccer players over there informally playing for their health, for their well-being. I don't, I think it would be good for you guys if you would go over and visit those sites and look how many, when you see 300 people in the afternoons playing soccer or kids with their parents. But the city seems to focus on infrastructure for the tourist industry and development. New roundabouts, parking structures, downtown bathrooms, plans for new access roads to Cane Creek and Sand Flats, Main Street access to hotels, new boat docks, stabilizing the creek banks for businesses. Those are all among your many projects. But I don't feel alone when I'm disturbed by the lack of attention to the local citizens' infrastructure, the people's parks, the care of shade trees that keep our streets cool, protecting our neighborhoods from noise and tourist traffic, potholes and dust and dirt in the streets we locals travel, or the local traffic hazards, making it hard to get kids safely to school and back. Connection and communications between the community and City Hall seem to be mainly through emails. City-appointed community boards and citizens committees are allowed to fade away with input from staff, city staff filling the vacuum. We have reached a point where connection between government and local people is so weak that citizens have taken it upon themselves to buy and distribute their own noise regulation signs for neighborhood streets in hope that we might get some relief from traffic noise. I think most of you who ran for office promised that you would listen to those of us who live here and make our homes in the city, that you would be an advocate for our neighborhoods and the health and well-being of local individuals and families and kids. I think most of you would have said that in campaigning for office or visiting with the townfolk, you became aware of how worried and stressed local citizens are that they are losing their sense of community and home. Please stand up for us. My opinion on the Scots on the Rocks, that it was not a good fit for the Center Street Ballpark or the neighborhood and should be denied. The Spanish Valley Arena is a venue better suited for the event.
Thank you, Carrie. Anybody else want to make a comment? Citizens to be heard. All righty. We'll move on to our next item, which is a proclamation on Arbor Day, which is on the 29th of April this year. So I will read this proclamation. In 1872, the Nebraska Board of Agriculture established a special day to be set aside for the planting of trees. And whereas this holiday called Arbor Day was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska, and whereas Arbor Day is now observed throughout the nation and the world, and whereas trees can be a solution to combating climate change by reducing the erosion of our precious topsoil by wind and water, cutting heating and cooling costs, moderating the temperature, cleaning the air, producing life-giving oxygen, and providing habitat for wildlife. And whereas trees are a renewable resource for giving us paper, wood for our homes, fuel for our fires, and countless other wood products, and whereas trees in our city increase property values, enhance the economic vitality of business areas, and beautify our community, and whereas trees, wherever they are planted, are a source of joy and spiritual renewal. Now, therefore, I, Joette Langanese, Mayor of the City of Moab, Utah, do hereby proclaim April 29th, 2022 as Arbor Day in the City of Moab, and I urge all citizens to celebrate Arbor Day and to support efforts to protect our trees and woodlands, and further, I urge all citizens to plant trees to gladden the heart and promote the well-being of this and future generations. Thank you. So go plant a tree. Next, consent agenda. We've got 5 items on this agenda. The first one is the joint defense agreement that we talked about earlier with the county and the city. The second is the award and approval of the Ballpark concessionaire contract, which is in your packet. I believe we had one person that applied. Third item is proposed resolution 1422, a resolution designated dispositories for the Moab City funds. 5.4, approval of the bills against the City of Moab in the amount of $270,960.30. And then approval of the minutes for March 31st and April 12th. Any questions from council? Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Motion made by Kalen, seconded? Seconded by Tawny. Any discussion, Kalen? Tawny? No. Luke? Ronnie? Jason? All right, I'm going to call for the roll call vote. How do you vote, Kalen?
Aye.
Tawny?
Aye.
Luke?
Aye.
Ronnie?
Aye.
Jason?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you. All right, moving on to special events. We've all heard about this. I'm going to have Kelly come and talk to us about the special event Scots on the Rocks 2022. We've gotten a variety of letters, both in support and not support. So, and I believe somebody from Scots on the Rocks is here. If council has any questions for the organizer, they can ask at that time.
Yes, so I'm here to present the information for the application of the Scots on the Rocks event to be held in the ball fields again this year. And as the mayor just mentioned, we do have someone that helps organize the event that's available for questions if you would like.
Great.
So this event was historically held out at the Old Spanish Trail Arena, and last year they applied to have it within the city limits at the ballparks, and that was brought to council and approved. And then this year they applied to have the event there again in October of this year. So we have I think there have been some additional letters sent, but in the packet is the application for this year, along with the letters from the organizers addressing some of the complaints that were submitted last year. And so if there's any other questions, please feel free to ask, and I will answer as best as I can.
Any questions for Kelly? No. Discussion? Have a motion?
I'd like to ask a couple of questions for
Sure, please.
to the organizers. I talked with one of your other people today. I know you know who it is. And some of the things I asked him is I wondered if the competition time could be shortened so it wasn't all day, both days, and he explained to me why the sanctions really won't allow that, so that's understandable. And I wondered if, to address some of the parking, is it possible that you guys institute a shuttle like they do at Colorado Mountain Wine Fest? There's a free one in town in Palisades over there. You park at the middle school and the bus comes like every 20 minutes. And then if you stay in Grand Junction, you can buy a pass for $20 and it goes clear to Grand Junction. I'm not sure that it's your responsibility as organizers to police everybody's dogs if you've told people not to bring them. Dog owners bear that responsibility. They don't obey the signs at any of the parks, whether there's an event or not. So I don't know that that's your responsibility. And I think this is a really good event. I think it's been really well organized and well supported. I had some reservations last year when we did it here. I'm just wondering, I don't want to tell you no because I don't want it to go away, but I am wondering if there's any appetite to move it back to the arena. Sure.
Sure, please. Marion, introduce yourself.
I will. I think most of you know who I am. I'm Marion DeLay, and I actually am one of the volunteers for the Scots on the Rocks. I work with all of the sponsors for the silent auction. So I work with the whole entire list of sponsors that we have throughout the community. Each year we gather probably about anywhere from $3,500 to $5,000 worth of merchandise so that we can have that silent auction, which affords the event the next year. So that's my part with that. I am very aware of the process she has to go through and the committee has to go through with the special events because that is what we did in a previous job that I had as well. And it's very daunting, and I respect the people that have to work on that and do that. So, and in regards to your comments, the dogs, number one, we fully agree. It's kind of hard. We do have 2 event vendors that have what is the dog?
Service dogs?
Service dog, that have service dogs, and there's nothing we can do to change that. As far as the other dogs, they come in and out of there all day, just through that little open gate, and there's not that many of them in there, but that when people come and bring their dog, we've asked them to take their dog, and so some of them have, and some have not come back, so. But we do what we can to take care of the dog issue. As far as the parking issue goes, the ideal situation for it being downtown is that more people can just walk to the event, and we don't have to have so many vehicles, because I'm one of the carbon folks, so it's kind of like, we don't need to have them all driving out there, 1 and 2 people in a car or whatever as well, because a shuttle system from anywhere downtown to out to the arena is very costly. The arena does not work well as an event or a venue for that, because every year, when it is in the fall, it is windy and we lose everything. Vendors don't come some anymore because they lost everything at 2 or 3 here, and the wind is just outrageous out there. So being downtown and being sheltered with the event in a location that is a recreation location that is designed for events, so it's just ideal down here. We have spoken, well, I haven't. Dan and Marta, the organizers, are already speaking with some of the local people that have large parking areas about the volunteers parking in their locations, so there would be no volunteer cars down here at all, and so that would eliminate all these that might get here early enough in the day. So we're working on getting that done as much as we can do to eliminate that. There are hotels that have shuttles and they'll work with them, I'm sure, but some of them have said, but I haven't had that conversation, so I'm not sure the details. I don't want to bring that into the conversation. And as far as the music goes, so the interesting thing about this event is that the music doesn't start until noon. The music portion of it doesn't start until noon on Saturday, and then it's over at 9. And then it starts again at 10 on Sunday and is over at 4. So it's really a short period of time. There are times where the bands are warming up and that sort of thing. And so this year we're looking at just moving the main music, the main stage, leaving it where it is and eliminating all the warm-up period over this end and moving it to another place so it's not all in one concentrated side of the park. So those are some changes that we're willing to make, but we're certainly willing to make any change we can. But this location is ideal. It's a perfect location for it. The event, it could grow. We didn't even use that end of the park hardly last year. It was like nobody out there. Sarah had a comment about the events, and if you've ever seen the events, it's crazy. These guys that throw these great big logs, they throw these great big logs in an area as long as this hall. That's it. And they are amazing. They're absolutely amazing. And this year, we're actually hosting the women's lightweight championships here, doing those same events. So I think that we're willing to do whatever we can to work with the community, work with the public. Carrie and I have been friends forever, and I hate that that music is that way. And she did mention that there were some people that actually came and sat on her lawn and practiced. And we will have a meeting with all of the clans and all of the vendors the day before this begins, and we'll make sure that that doesn't happen again, that everything remains contained in the park. And as far as parking, cars in the park, it's strange to me to address this because we have 600 cars coming to park on the city park this weekend. And so the ones that are in here, they drive in to unload their stuff at their vendor booth, set up their booths, and the majority of them leave. Last year we had a couple of them stay. They were security, and so they stayed on the grounds. But this year, unless it is absolutely necessary to have any vehicle there, there will not be any. So,
really quickly, was there damage that the city incurred with it being there last year?
Last year, one sprinkler head was broken, but it was paid for and replaced the week after the event.
By the organizers?
Yes.
Was there like ruts in the grass that had to be taken care of or anything like that?
Not to my knowledge.
yeah. So when the events happen, when the games are happening and they're throwing those, if anything happens, they actually have guys that go out, take care of, do damage control.
Any questions for Marion from council?
Did I address everything?
I think so.
When I'd spoken with Dan, he said that they were gonna maybe try to find another place for the bands to practice, you know, and I, that would be off-site, would that be the plan, so that, you know, maybe they're practicing, I don't know, like behind the city, I don't know, someplace else, you know, stuff, so that, because I guess I haven't seen the bands playing, is it, from what I've heard from residents and people in the area, it starts at X amount of time, and it goes nonstop, never stops until 10 o'clock at night.
And they're right in that the bands aren't playing all the time like that, but there's always warm-up, because this is a competition. It's kind of like a rodeo. All these guys come here to collect points, and at the end of the season, there's a national collection of all these points that they've received and where their band's placed, and that's part of the purpose of this. The reason that it goes on all day, though, is because they have competitions. How many of you have actually attended the event? So you probably know that, like, you've seen them out on the lawn, they'll call this band to come, and they come and they have to get in a circle, and they have to do a circle formation, and there's judges that give them points and so on and so forth. So while these people are on the floor, on the ground, on that spot, the other bands are over here practicing. And so they can't be away from the event, because as soon as this one's done, they're on the spot. So they have to be able to move in and out of that rotation really quickly. And that's why it's too almost impossible to do that. Because they actually thought about, well, maybe we see if we could get Star Hall and they could do practice in Star Hall and then walk over. But they're too far from the you're on moment. And they start practicing, so the practicing starts early in the morning. Or not too early, because all of them stay in bed. But yeah, it does start, it can start at 9 o'clock in the morning. And the competition, the girls' dancing competition, on Saturday it starts at 2, but on Sunday it starts at 10 o'clock in the morning. So there's music behind that and the dance, and so there is that. And on Saturday there's a parade, and the parade comes from the MIC down Center Street to here, so that they can open the event at noon, because that's what time the event actually opens, is at noon on Saturday.
Anybody else?
I would just like to say a couple of things about some of the phrases and comments that we got. And people that are organizing this are our community members. They are our friends and our neighbors. Many of these people have served this community for decades in other positions. And they do care about the impacts on the neighborhoods, and they care about our neighborhoods. They're not doing this to torture anybody. These are not torture devices. That's unfortunate that people have used that term to describe this, because it's patently untrue. It is a noisy event. But if we're going to start to regulate things that go on at our parks to this extent, music is music. And if we're not going to allow one type of music, we should not be arbitrary and allow another kind just because it's more acceptable to somebody's ear. In favor of this event, I heard this is family-oriented. This is about heritage and culture and education. Those are all things that this council has said is important to them. It's about friendship. It's about winding down after a long season of tourism. It's an emotional connection to their past and to their ancestors. There are big smiles. The food is great. That's not a reason that we approve of an event or not. But
sure,
these are all positive things. This is not being done in a nefarious way. This has always been a really well-organized, good event. I was really thinking that it might not be the right place, but like I said, I don't want to deny it and have it go away, because I think it brings a lot of people joy.
Could I say one other thing as well? I live out in Spanish Valley. 3 days ago, we had 45-mile-an-hour winds come in, take down my neighbor's flagpole, and I couldn't see my barn because it was so much dirt and so much dust and trees blowing from the horse pasture in our backyard over a fence and into my yard. Those are the kinds of winds that we've experienced out there. That kind of wind, this event cannot sustain that again. They just can't do it. It's just impossible to do it. And yes, it may not happen every year, but every year that it was out there, it did happen.
I do kind of have a question about that. Like OSTA does have the indoor arena that is sheltered from the wind. Can the vendors not like set up in there to protect some of those aspects of the event in that arena, whereas a lot of the the heavy sports like can be done outdoors? I feel like logs flying and like heavy stones flying through the air aren't going to be too affected by the wind. Because I do agree. I think it is really a fantastic event, and I don't want to see it leave this community, particularly because it is composed so significantly of members of our surrounding area. However, I do understand where a lot of people are coming from. Where, yeah, I don't agree that I don't want to regulate the types of music that get played, but I do understand where people are coming from in that, like the Moab Folk Festival, like they have kind of various songs. As far as I understand it, it is the same song being played over and over and over again for 12 hours, which is a lot to endure. And that's one of the things that was getting brought up in a lot of the responses that we were getting today, is that the neighborhood surrounding the ballparks is already exposed to the folk festival, is already exposed to all of the activities that are happening on basically a weekly, if not daily basis during these things. And so it's, yes, we can point to those things as, well, you see, like you allow all of these other loud things going on, but I guess the argument is just because we allow loud things there, does that mean that there needs to be loud things allowed all the time, like at this event, at the expense of the people who are kind of living in that area? So I'm really hard pressed right now, because I have swung by the event and I do really enjoy it, but the people within this area are the ones that in a lot of ways are kind of exposed to the ATV noise and like a lot of the event noises in general. And so I understand the proximity of, or the benefits of having events so proximally located to downtown, but the more that we concentrate in that area, it also concentrates the negative impacts that a significant number of effects have on a very specific segment of our neighborhood or of our community.
So in answer to your question about moving more of that inside the venue, the first year, and I'm going to, Karen.
I've got a few comments to make.
So the first year, they did try to do quite a bit of it inside. Only the problem with that is it's all dirt, and it's all horse dirt, so it's all fine dirt, and they have bagpipes.
Yeah.
So it really doesn't work with the bagpipes, so you have to have them outside. So being on the grass makes a major difference. I mean, they could be on gravel, like a paved gravel type situation, but to be on that horse dirt is almost impossible. So we couldn't keep it inside. We had to move everything onto the outside. As far as the downtown being impacted, I understand the angst with that as well. But I think if there's any consideration that this event has to move, then I think all music events should move. Anything with vendors, anything that's going to have people on the lawn. It's kind of it's not a fairness issue or anything like that, but it's a policy that if it's going to be applied to one group, then it should be the same applied to others, I think. And the folk festival is one of my favorites as well. The music, I've been here long enough to attend them all, and I understand it. And that's why I say I understand her angst especially, because it's like it's in her living room. But I also.
Can I make a few comments, please?
we'll finish, we're going to have a discussion, and then if we need your input, we'll let you know. Yeah, just wait just a minute, okay? Kayla?
I'm going to save my comments until after I make a motion, so if you're not ready for a motion, I will wait.
All right. Do you have some comments you'd like to make?
Yes, I'm also part of the Scots on the Rocks organization. I am a volunteer coordinator, I was, and I've been with it for 6 years. I have seen it grow. I have seen a lot of things happen over the years. One reason why we don't use the arena for a lot of the vendors and for some of the activities is that our dance competition, which is a national competition, is inside. They have access to the arena, and they have to have a certain amount of quietness and isolation so they can do their competitions. And I think there's also an extra charge if we start using the facility more than what we're already paying. As far as being downtown, it was a wonderful experience for us to do that. This was the first year for us. It was a learning curve, very definitely a learning curve. We know a lot of things that need to be changed and done differently. All we're asking, I think, at this point is just another chance. Because I think we can do a lot better as far as coordinating things with the residents and trying to facilitate things with the different activities in town.
Thank you. All right, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to deny a special event license for the 2022 Scots on the Rocks event to be held in the city of Moab at the Center Street Ballparks.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion made by Kalen, seconded by Ronnie. Discussion, Kalen.
So we've received letters of support and complaint regarding this event, and many of those in support attest to their great enjoyment of the event for reasons that have already been articulated over at least the last several years, including at a location without the negative impacts on city residents. The applicant's submittal did not, in my opinion, make any substantive concession to the noise impacts of the event on the surrounding residential neighborhood, but detailed the strict rules governing such competitions. This leads me to conclude that the event and noise impacts will be the same as last year. I hear that there will be mitigations for other things, but I think the primary issue is the noise. And other events featuring amplified and non-competitive music at Moab parks are conducted without garnering this level of negative response. So I feel like in this case, the neighboring residents come first.
Ronnie?
Well, first of all, I just want to say I think there's been misunderstanding in the community because we don't talk enough in Moab about one of the central reasons that I think a lot of us live here is for the diversity of our community, and that term means different things in different parts of the United States, but I think one of the reasons a lot of us here are here and stay here to the extent that we can is because there are so many people here of varying backgrounds, and we have the benefit of learning about each other and each other's backgrounds. So I would concur with everyone, and I do think most people who've written us, really think this is a fabulous event, and that we all do need more contact with culture, our own culture, and learning from each other's cultures, and celebrating art and athleticism. And the good spirit of competition. So I want to say I've always heard great things about the event in that respect. So I certainly support it continuing in the community. I, after reading comments from people, really felt like a lot of the comments I was reading had more to do with loving the event and wanting it to continue, as opposed to it necessarily having to be at the ballpark. Versus at the Old Spanish Trail Arena. And certainly it seems like some of the conflict that happened last year is easily resolved by using the Old Spanish Trail Arena in terms of size and the specific needs of the competition and being able to practice near that space. Wind is a problem throughout the valley. I live a block from the ballpark. I have ways of measuring wind on my property. It is very high. We've all seen tents nearly blow down at Swanee Park during the Arts Festival. Also, it is possible to have good turnout at the arena. Anybody who attended the powwow in the past year knows that. So I didn't see compelling reason in what I read that you couldn't have a successful event out at the arena. And there are so many people who use the arena who find ways to deal with the natural elements. And I do think that from the conflict I've read about, that part of the conflict that's occurring is the need for more space. And we are constrained with the ball field by its limited space and the fact that it is surrounded by homes on several sides. And a lot of us were elected to look out not just for communal needs, but also neighborhood needs. And one of the biggest rallying cries that people in our community are unhappy about, and we know this from our wellness survey, we know this from our community vision surveys that we've just done with about 800 people in the community, is noise. And I just know from my interaction with people that people are pulling their hair out wanting us to do more. And I do feel like while the state legislature does reduce some of what we can do, this is something that we can say is maybe better situated down at the arena. Just like we made a choice about pickleball, not being appropriate at Old City Park, but being more appropriate at the arena. I think this is another situation where the arena is a good venue. And I would just say, I hope we all learn from the example that the Arts Festival has set with animal control, that they are actually paying animal control to be on site, because we all know it's virtually impossible to control people bringing their pets into the parks. And so I do feel like for us as a body, when we are looking at the additional costs that are required to put on special events, that paying to have animal control officer present as the the Arts Festival is doing at Swanee is something we need to think about doing on a regular basis. I guess that's the bulk of what I have. I think these are all great events, and we should all get out and celebrate each other collectively, but not every use is going to be ideal in every location. And I would just concur with Kaylin. Part of the problem is we don't get complaints about the folk festival. We did get a lot of complaints about this one, and it's one of the reasons that our special events permitting is structured, so that when there are complaints, they come back to council. So I guess those are my comments.
Thanks, Ronnie. Any other discussion? And then I'm going to ask Kalen to amend his motion to include ordinance criteria, such as noise was your issue for denial.
Yep. So you might recall that our ordinance limits our ability to deny event applications to about 8 criteria. And it does sound like, Keelan, yours satisfies one of them, which is the event presents significant or unacceptable adverse impacts upon the community, other businesses or residents, which cannot be reasonably mitigated. And you kind of cite specifically the noise impact. So I just want to make sure that's on the record, because we want to establish the basis for the denial, according to the ordinance.
So just the noise impacts or all that?
All of it too. I mean, we can refer to those comments that you made about the unavoidable or unmitigatable impacts.
Okay.
I read through the others, and others are a little more, that's sort of the catch-all, where the community impacts are unfavorable. I can also bring it up the ordinance. Would that help?
I was about to do that, but if you just wanted to.
I have it ready.
Oh, good. Thank you.
And we can fill it up here. So that's under 2.
Oh.
So if you don't mind amending the ordinance just to include that language.
Do you want to have more discussion first, or would you
Yeah,
like me
if
to
you don't
amend?
mind.
Oh, that's fine.
I
I just want to make sure.
And then we
Yeah.
can amend the most and have a vote. That works for everybody. Jason, discussion.
Yeah, those are all great points. when this came up, I reached out to the organizers just to kind of ask them some questions and stuff. And I think one of the big things that kind of caught my attention was that when I was talking to them is that they were not aware of that people were not happy with this event. They were not aware that the city had gotten letters, complaining about the event. So I kind of feel like that that this kind of came up, and there wasn't feedback to the event organizers, which I think failed the organizers. Because they thought that they would put on this great event, and then they had nothing telling them that they were doing anything wrong. And so I don't think that's fair for an event, and I don't think that's an event for an organizers. I think that there should be kind of a debrief after an event saying these are the things that came up. What can we do to rectify it? What can we do? The band's playing, all the time. The noise, the dogs on the field. All things that kind of came up, after the fact. And so I think that that in the future those things need to be kind of addressed with any event that's going on. And then, this event is a cultural event, which we've kind of talked about. People have said that, hey, we don't get a lot of complaints about the folk festival because everybody loves the folk festival, and stuff. But, if you come to the folk festival, I have to park 3 blocks away to go to the folk festival. There's just as much traffic. There's just as much of those things going on. And I worry that, as we go down this slope of denying an event because we think that we don't like the bagpipe music, or we don't like the music of this culture, are we then saying, we're only going to accept certain types of music, that we like, and this is a cultural event for these guys, the music is culture, the dancing, throwing a log in the air is odd, but it's their cultural thing,
We're weird, Jason.
And but this is the things that these people thrive on. They love, and it's a good event. And I feel like that, it's a good event in the town. People come from all over town, to this. And I think that we got complaints about the street festival that was in front of the Mark last year. That was such a fun event. That was a great event. There was community. The community was together. They were finishing off the thing. And the same thing happens at Scott. Scott's on the Rocks. People love. I hear people talking all the time like, "Hey, we're going to go see the Wild Tinkers at Scott's on the Rocks." It's a family affair, and it's a family event. And so as we do this, are we saying that, hey, a guitar is fine, or but bagpipes are not fine, and I think that it creates a criteria that maybe we're at the point where we don't let concerts be at the arts festival. We don't let these events be here, because that impacts those people around it, and I know that it is an impact, and I know that for those neighbors, but no one's ever sat down with Scott's on the Rocks and said, hey, can you end at 8 instead of 9? Or 7 instead of 10? What kind of accommodations? These are the concerns that have come up. Can you address these concerns? If there's a perception of they're doing damage to the ballpark, then maybe we need to work with the grounds crew and come up with a way to mitigate that, or let people know. And so I think that Scott's on the Rocks in town is a good event. I've been to it out at the arena, and it is windy. But it's not as well attended by, I think, locals. And I think in town it has a better attendance by the people that are here, and it's culturally diverse, which is good. So I would think that it should be approved with the recommendation that we sit down with the organizers and go over it line by line of what, and say, this is what came up, what can we do about it? This is what came up, what can we do about it? And we work together, with the city and the organizers to create an event that we can all get along with, that appeases and takes care of those issues, as much as we can.
Luke?
Yeah, I see both sides to this, and it's not an easy or comfortable decision to make. I think the thing that I ultimately just keep coming back to is that, yes, this is like a music event, but the form that it takes is significantly different from other music-based events in that there is no other music-based event where it is the same song being played for 12 hours straight at a really loud volume. And it sounds like because of like the very strict, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but because of the very strict kind of guidelines that really regulate these musical events, I don't know that there is room for shortening the actual music period. And so that, I think that's where it kind of gets to what Kaylin was referring to, where the biggest, it seems as though the biggest complaint about the event is the one that cannot be mitigated in terms of reducing the duration of the music. I do think there are, like with the folk festival where there's like set times, the vehicular traffic and everything like that is kind of condensed to certain periods, whereas an open festival like that really allots itself to a constant coming and going, so there's a lot more vehicular traffic happening within the surrounding areas. And yeah, I don't know, I mean, I still also kind of come back to that if we allow all of these loud events, and that's like the criteria, that if I allowed this one loud event in town and I have to allow this one, like moving forward, if we just get a series of applications for loud event after loud event every single weekend, do we use that as precedent that, well, I've allowed all of these other loud events every single one of these like consecutive weekends leading up to it? To a certain degree, like once again, it is this part of our community that is being exposed to the most noise because of like these events being so concentrated in this area, that at a certain point I think they need some respite from that as well, and they've identified this event as potentially being, outside of like ATV noise and everything like that, being the one that has the most significant disturbance to their like quality of life. So like those are kind of the factors that I'm taking into it. It does sound like, as we've heard, that as Scots on the Rocks initially occurred throughout like all of the years leading up to last year, it was an event that continued to grow. And yes, it had the highest turnout last year, partly because of its proximity to downtown, and I think some of that was traffic from visitors who, as was mentioned in several of the comments that we received, that they heard that noise and they're just like, what's that? I'm going to go check it out. And I don't want to stop an event from continuing to grow and to flourish and stuff like that, but if the continuing to flourish and grow and everything is coming at the expense of parts of our community who, unfortunately, a lot of things come at their expense, that's a balance that I'm really hard pressed to like give equal merit, I guess. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I enjoy the event, and kind of what Tony was saying, I don't want to do anything that potentially jeopardizes its ability to continue to move forward, but as was stated, we were also elected kind of on the promise that we were going to listen to our community members about the impacts that they're having on their quality of life in a wide variety of ways, and I think this is one of those situations. So yeah, I think those are kind of my thoughts. I don't know, I think otherwise we'll just end up talking in circles, because it's, yeah.
Tony, do you have any more
Well, I think Jason makes a really good point. If the issues were not communicated, I don't think that's fair to any event organizer. And we have different staff this year, so there was not continuity in that. That's not anybody's fault. You know, and Marion said, you know, we'd just like another chance to see what we can do. I know it's different kind of music. And yes, I could hear it at my house sometimes last year. But I am not ready to say, you can have one kind of music and not another, or one kind of dancing and not another. That just does not seem fair in my mind. It seems pretty biased. So that's all I have to say.
So, I guess my question to you, Kelly, is if this is denied, or could the event organizers come back and address some of the concerns that were addressed, and see if and then come back to the council with a mitigated plan?
I think according to code, there is an appeal process for that. And in terms of some of the complaints that were expressed, so I communicate with the event organizers, but oftentimes after events, complaints aren't directed to me.
Right.
So I didn't necessarily know about them until the application was submitted again this year. So to give them those to address was at this time when, so the attached letters addressing the concerns, I gave them when I got them, essentially. But I do agree that we can improve on that and have a better process for communicating that information to organizers post-event.
That's great, good. All right, Kalen has a motion. We've asked him to amend it to include language that meets a criteria for denial.
I move to amend my motion to add that the the event presents significant or unacceptable adverse impacts upon the community and residents, which cannot reasonably be mitigated.
Thank you for that amendment. Ronnie, are you okay with the amendment?
Yeah.
Great. All right. I am going to call for the motion that Kalen just made. I'm not going to repeat the motion, but basically it was to deny it because of the significant impacts to the community that cannot be mitigated. Kalen, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ronnie?
Aye.
Jason?
Aye, no.
Aye.
Aye. Tawny?
No.
Motion passes with Jason and Tawny voting no, Ronnie, Luke, and Kalen voting aye. And just for a little follow-up on this, I did speak with Annie this afternoon. She is going to be doing a Parks Master Plan this year. That's part of her plans for this year. And I think that the council really needs to rethink what events are appropriate at the city park, right here in the middle of town. Carrie and Kyle Bailey presented us with a really nice review of the agreement that we made with the school district for use of that park. And I think we need to revisit that. And then when Annie does her master plan, make some recommendations as to what the appropriate use is, which basically the school district is for recreation, education, and I can't remember the third one. But so I just feel that that's important. And so we'll be hearing more about this. And on a side note, as we mentioned, if the organizers would like to appeal this, they have the right to do that and come back to us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kelly, you're still up.
I'm going to stay here for a little bit.
Community contributions, 2022 revisions and new recommendations. Hopefully you guys will be able to take action on this. Kelly did an excellent job based on the comments that you guys provided at our last meeting on what we want to provide from a social services standpoint, and gave you several options to decide from. One is option A, which is with the original recommendation. Option B is with the social services priorities that we discussed. And option C is a hybrid of a combination of both. And just for clarification, this community contribution is basically for 21-22 budget, and that in the 22-23 budget, we'll be talking more about separating out social services programs from the RAP tax. And so we're going to kind of modify how we provide support for these community events and social services. Partly be separated out. So discussion on, or questions for Kelly, or a motion? Ronnie.
So I have a question for Kelly and then a bunch of questions for colleagues. So Kelly, I saw in the shared question document the exchange between you and Luke about Sea Haven. So just for anyone listening and to make sure I understand, because in this community contributions $55,000 pool, in the spreadsheet, we had a $10,000 request from them, but we do have an existing line item on the budget that already gives them $10,000. So we were just trying to clarify, are they asking for this year for $10,000 total or $20,000 total? So I just wanted to make sure. It sounded like from the discussion the two of you had, I felt like I was getting conflicting information, so I just wanted to make sure, what it is they're asking for, because that, if there's another 10 grand here to give away, that matters. Yeah.
So in my understanding from the email I received, what was that this was an additional ask from that line item. But it sounded like Luke was kind of in communication with them and had heard that they would be okay with just the 10. And with the reduced cuts in their budget this year from VOCA, anything additional is great for them, is what we're hearing.
Okay, that helps. And then I don't know if colleagues had a chance to look at the shared document, but I had asked, some questions just to help me understand. Some organizations, we offer them a break or on office space or rent, and sometimes it helps me to have a monetary amount to associate with that, because it just helps me kind of understand the value of the individual in-kind and financial contributions that we're giving to individual groups, just as we try to be fair. So if anybody didn't have a chance to see that. One of my questions is, we budget in the spring and pass our budget in June. And so when we selected this total $55,000, it was last year. And then, of course, things happen. And sometimes, for example, sales tax, other tax income revenue that you were expecting ends up coming in higher or lower than where you thought you would be revenue-wise. And I think during the pandemic that might have impacted some of our giving. But I guess one of my questions for the group was, I'm under the impression that we've done relatively well, not that, we have money to burn, but revenue-wise in terms of what we projected and what we've ended up coming. So I was curious if there was any appetite, given that, to potentially up this fund from the $55,000 total. And my other question for the group has to do with, I've heard some people kind of categorize the asks that we're getting as, maybe social versus things that might fall under RAP, like recreation, arts, and parks. But to me, I'm not sure that everything falls under those individual categories. When I look, for example, at the request from Terra Sophia or rim-to-rim restoration, we're talking about fire prevention, clearing brush, green infrastructure pilot project. I'm not really sure if that fits. I guess it could fit maybe into parks, but to a certain extent, to me, that's kind of some of us putting our money where our mouth is on sustainability and asking ourselves, we've been talking about green infrastructure. Are we willing to, somewhere else in the budget, commit some funds to make sure some kind of pilot happens? And also in terms of something like, we had a serious fire in the community last year, and chances are we're going to see more of those. And in recent fires that have broken out, firefighters have commented on the fact that clearing was helpful. So are we willing to not put much money towards that, knowing that we get a lot of bang for our buck when a fire breaks out? I'm just wondering if a few of these things maybe don't fit elsewhere in our budget. And one of the things, for those of you who are new, that we've always done with this on the council side is have a little discussion about, are there things here that either community partners or we could find ways to fund in a creative manner? So I just kind of wanted to throw those things out there about either potentially increasing the fund or whether some of these kind of more public safety and infrastructure issues are maybe a little bit different, the green infrastructure and the fire prevention. I'll throw that out there.
Caitlin?
Thank you for generating an option B. It seems like, as I look at this, there's so much good work that other groups are doing or want to do in the community, so I'm excited about funding them regardless of how it turns out. But rereading the requests and the option B allocation, I was struck that, well, option B is what we asked for, but that also reduce funding to programs that can help prevent the worst-case social outcomes via earlier intervention. So option B has, if anything, clarified for me that actually I have a preference for option A. I realize, but I'm going to let someone else make whatever motion they're going to make because I suspect that's not where the council is going.
Questions, comments, council?
Yeah, thank you for, first, I'm sorry, because I think I'm the one that kind of like started the ball rolling in terms of the kind of reassessment or the redistribution of these funds, but I really appreciate the different options that were laid out, and in a lot of ways, I think option C kind of ticks a lot of the check boxes for me, and kind of upon clarification from Seahaven that, from my understanding and from my background there, it seems that $10,000 was the line item in both budgets, both the cities and the and Seahaven's that they submitted to us, and anything extra would be fantastic. And so with that, I'm actually open to going with option C, but reducing Seahaven's award by like $2,000 to $3,000 to disperse amongst some of those other agencies. I would potentially like to see a little bit more go towards CFI. They do serve a lot of kids, and I think in a really fun, interesting way. Kind of in my experience in Moab is, I was almost surprised when I kind of discovered this, but a lot of the local kids don't really have the connection with the surrounding areas that you potentially would expect or would hope when you find yourself in this kind of like a majestic setting as we find ourselves here. And I think CFI does a really great job of providing some kind of childcare while also providing like really fun, meaningful education in a way that I don't think is really available through a lot of programming. I'm always willing to fund MVMC more, I think, right now. Them and Moab Solutions have kind of wound up being the drain plug of our community, where if there isn't any sort of service available, they're the ones who kind of step in and try to catch the people before they really slip down those dark cracks, or dark holes, I guess. But yeah, I really appreciate the time and effort that went into kind of redistributing things based on some of the comments that were made at the previous meeting, and I really like the distribution of funds. I do think that an additional $5,000 to Seahaven would be a boon for what they expected, and I think there is some flexibility to potentially address, because I do agree, I think prevention is ideally where a lot of our money should go. Prevention, like, it's the whole, forgetting all the colloquialisms about how much like a penny saved is a dollar earned or whatever, where and a lot of times it's a lot easier to prevent something and a lot less expensive to take those proactive measures than it is to respond and react to those situations. So I'm open to kind of funneling some money around, but if council as a whole wants to just stick with option A, B, or C, I'm definitely open to entertaining that as well.
Anybody else? Tawny?
Yeah, I kind of agree with I just went blank. I'm sorry, Luke. I forgot your name momentarily. I was going to call you Jason, and I knew that wasn't right. I agree with you after I kind of read your narrative about Seahaven. I just didn't want that line item to go away. So I'm okay with taking a little bit out of that pocket and redistributing it to somewhere else.
Jason? Oh, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, those were my those were my biggest concerns, was Moab Solutions, the Multicultural Center in Sea Haven.
Jason?
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I think, Moab Solutions does some really good work. And I had a good talk with Sarah today about it, and I've used Sarah quite a bit, and she's more than willing to help out, and I think that she's very good. My only other thing was, Sea Haven I think is great, but if I could like to see that going someplace else. The other one I saw was Resiliency Hub. They had last year they got $1,500 for gardens, for the tea garden, I think is what it is, in town, and then the other big part of that fund was to put in gardens in Spanish Valley. And I think that part of the criteria at the top of it said for Moab residents. So my thing was maybe bump on option C, bump that down to the original 1,500, and then move that 500 to another organization that could use it and keep it for Moab residents. Even though I think that there's probably other options with the for them to do what they're trying to do with that, and that was my only suggestion. But yeah, I went into this meeting wanting option B, but after hearing all of you guys, I think I could, like, option C even sounds, pretty good as a hybrid.
Mayor, may I clarify two things?
Yes, please.
First of all, thank you for your comments, and I did want to point out that our whole Community Contributions Committee did meet again to do the work and do the reallocations. And then second is when we send out the funding, we send out grant agreements to all of the parties, and we can specify in those agreements what the funding is for. So, and I kind of mentioned this to one of Ronnie's comments earlier, we can put in that agreement that it's specifically for this project or specifically to be spent in city limits, so that can be included.
Great, thank you. And in terms of Ronnie's question about more money, just to clarify, this was what was budgeted for 2021. And so I appreciate your comments, and I think when we do budget 2022, 23, we definitely need to consider those organizations that didn't get funded through this
Yeah,
project.
what I'm saying is we occasionally amend the budget, and our revenues came in higher than initially anticipated last June. So I'm just wondering if anyone has appetite, to use more of that bonus revenue towards our groups, because, I mean, in some ways, they're the ones, when we grow, they're the ones who take a lot of the brunt of that. But I also was curious if there's anything creative that can be done with any of the Arpa funds, because in some of the Arpa funds are supposed to be used for pandemic impact, and in some ways, it's the people in our community who have the least who have paid the highest price under the pandemic, and I didn't know if there's any way to boost any of this funding or cover any of it with any of the Arpa, because one of the things we talked about with Arpa was using it towards the community, and I think that could help some of the folks who are.
Great comments, good thoughts. I think the ARPA funding is on our agenda to talk about next. So I'm going to just ask for a motion, and if you want to amend the budget to include more into this, that's up to the council.
Okay, I will just say for the record that I do think it would be good if we could find more funds to give a bit more to KZMU to fund solutions at that level that they're asking, same with the Multicultural Center. And I do think safety and infrastructure-wise, we do need to look at the fire prevention under Rindarim and the green infrastructure under Terra Sophia.
Motion.
Oh, sorry, and I have a preference for option A.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
Oh, sorry, the last thing was I forgot to mention which option I preferred, so that would be A.
A. All right, I'm going to ask for a motion.
I'm not quite sure how to make it.
I'm going to throw out an option. I move to approve the City of Moab Community Contributions Ad Hoc Committee's recommendation for option C for the 2022 funding.
Motion made by Jason. Second?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Luke. Discussion, Jason? Luke?
I'm still open to amending that motion to moving some of those funds that we'd previously discussed.
That's what I was going to ask is,
Yeah.
do we need to include any adjustments we might make?
Yes, we should. So do you want to make a suggestion?
Are you open to amending your,
I am, totally.
okay, I'll let you do it.
I move to approve the City of Community Contributions ad hoc, community recommendations, option C, for the 2022,000 funding with the following suggestions,
Adjustments?
which are taking 2,000 away from, or moving 2,000 from Sea Haven, and putting that funding towards CFI. Is that correct?
I'm open to, I do agree about the rim to rim and kind of some of those preventative like mitigation things. So I guess like, let's say we have $2,000 to play around with, which other asks would we potentially like to support?
Well, we're going to be
and
talking
then-
about the ARPA funds
Yeah.
later, and
Okay.
you guys need to decide on that before we can allocate money from that, depending on
Okay.
what your decision is on that. Go ahead, Jason.
And then I'd like to move $500 from Resiliency Hub and put it towards, sorry, let me get the right name, Moab Solutions.
So what are the two again? Can you say that again?
No.
It was
2,000
to CFI.
Enough, and move that to CFI.
2,000 to CFI?
From Sea Haven to CFI.
Okay,
And 500 from Resiliency Hub
To Moab
to Moab.
solutions, all right. Are you okay with that amendment, Luke?
Sure.
All right.
Okay.
All right, so we've got an amended motion to approve the community contribution based on hybrid option C with an adjustment to move funding $2,000 from Sea Haven to CFI and 500 from Resiliency to Moab Solutions.
Correct.
Made by Jason, seconded by Luke. Any further discussion? Jason?
No, I think Ronnie's right, and I think that we can find, hopefully we can find funding. I think, that's probably a question to have Ben, here to ask questions on. But I think rim-to-rim restoration and some of these other ones are pretty important, and hopefully that, we can find funding from other places to support a lot of these other groups that need it.
Yeah, I mean,
Go ahead.
you are in budget season, so there are a lot of other ways to get funding to these organizations that don't have to fall under the rubric of community contributions, especially something like Rim to Rim, where they're doing work for us, where we can contract with them and have like a line item for that kind of work. So just keep that in mind. You're not limited to this process when.
Right.
Like, we could figure out what Rim to Rim wants to do,
Yeah.
and then have them.
Have a contract.
Have a
with them.
contract with them.
Yep.
Yeah,
Which we have done in the past with them.
right, that's what I was kind of
Yeah.
wondering if we could do that.
Luke, your discussion on the amended motion with the adjustments.
Yeah, I mean, obviously not an easy decision to make when, in the grand scheme of things, it's a limited amount of funds for so many like really deserving programs. But I'm really excited at the prospect of council really having a discussion to flesh out the different ways in which we might be able to kind of spread some of our money. And I'm really excited at us hiring a grant writer for the city, because I've been looking around at a lot of grants that are out there that I think are really great for the city to act as a pass-through entity, where we basically just apply for the grants and contract out with somebody who already has the expertise and infrastructure, but just needs some extra funding, so that the city's not taking on more liability or anything like that, and we kind of delegate reporting responsibilities to those groups or individuals, on top of like the RAP tax funds and like the Arpa funds. So I think there's a lot of really exciting avenues kind of ahead of us for being able to leverage a lot of the expertise and like goodwill within our community and try to support that financially with all of these different tools that are potentially at hand.
Thanks. Ronnie?
No, thanks. I probably said what I wanted to say.
Great. Kaylin?
Nothing.
Tani?
No, I'm good.
All right, we've got a motion made by Jason, seconded by Luke. How do you vote, Jason?
Aye.
Luke?
Aye.
Ronnie?
No?
Kaylin?
Aye.
Tawny?
Aye.
All right, motion passes 4-0. Ronnie is a nay. Okay, next up, Kelly, you are popular tonight. It's so nice to see your smiling face. This is just an update on the RAP tax, so if you have any questions, this is about the process and eventually, I think in the next meeting or two, there's going to be an ordinance that you guys have to approve that kind of, that describes and gives us the authority to make those authorizations. I think I said that kind of right.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, so since we had the presentation in the last council meeting from the Grantwell team, staff just wanted to touch on what our recommendations are based off of their research. So the staff recommendation is to have a committee that consists of 5 voting members and 1 non-voting staff member that's the chair of the committee. And then to have this be a public body, it would be an application process for committee members and then mayoral appointment. And then they would have staggered terms with 2 and 3 years as their length, and that's to help keep that knowledge in the committee so that when there's that changeover, you don't have to kind of start from scratch with the new ones, just kind of as council does. So staff is going to be working on an ordinance for this body, and we have to have it go through legal review before we bring it to you, but that's our next step.
Kaylin?
So would they eventually become just 3-year terms? It seems like it makes sense to have them be different lengths initially to set up the staggering, but
Yes.
ultimately you would have periods where there was a lot of turnover occasionally.
I think, so your first group, there's 2 people with 2, 3 people with 3, and then move to that 3-year term.
Okay.
Any other questions for Kelly on the RAP tax update? Ronnie?
So I was just curious about a little bit more of the thinking about why 5 voting. I guess I was, and then I'm also interested in when people apply, what, if anything, is going to constitute a conflict of interest? Because this is a little bit hard to think through, but I was like, on the one hand, since it's a RAP tax, in some ways it seems like, you might want to look for 2 committee members with a recreation background, 2 with an arts background and 2 with a parks background, because you want some of the expertise and knowledge, but at the same time, you could have a conflict of interest if, committee members, are maybe suggesting things that benefit their own businesses, and what have you. So I was just curious what, if any, thinking went into that, and kind of, I understand people like odd numbers, but kind of why 5, and, just to help me think through, if a whole bunch of people who apply who all have backgrounds in the arts, is that okay, or do we somehow need some kind of different backgrounds on that committee? Yeah.
Right, so the conflict of interest did come up for us, and that's kind of why we'd want to have an application process and an appointment. And then that 5 number being, we don't want that burnout of people serving on a lot of different committees and being overwhelmed. So in terms of having like a 7-person committee, we didn't want to be asking too much from people and having that kind of area where people didn't want to be on the committee anymore. So that was some of the thought process behind that. And I feel like you kind of had one more in there for me. Would you mind repeating?
Yeah, that probably kind of answers it. I guess I'm just a little bit on the fence about 5 versus 7, because sometimes I feel like when it can be hard to fill 7 seats, but at the same time, sometimes it does break up workload. So I'm just a little bit torn. Yeah.
Anyway. We have a couple of 7-member commissions, and they're extremely difficult to staff, and we have problems with quorum constantly. So I believe that Grantwell recommended a 7-person to break up workload, but just given the size of our community and realistically the amount of applications, I don't know how onerous it would be over time.
And the meetings would only be once a year as well.
Something to consider when we get the ordinance before us.
Yeah, I think if you find that 5 members is not enough to get the work done, it's easier to add a couple more than to keep keep postponing meetings because you have quorum issues or, people decide they don't want to do it anymore. I think it's a little easier to manage a 5-person committee.
Any other questions for Kelly? We'll be seeing this ordinance in the next couple of meetings, sometimes in May is what we're anticipating.
Yep.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you. I'm done now.
All right, next item is a declaration of ARPA non-entitlement unit proceeds. And basically, Ben touched on this during his financial presentation at our last meeting. And so we've got to make a decision on how we want to use the $631,519 that we received from ARPA. We have a choice of unrestricted, and then we can use it for basically whatever we want. And we talked about that when we met last week. We do have some options. Ronnie brought up some options also. This money, is that for this year, or is this for next year?
It's for this year, for
Okay,
any time.
all
We
right.
have a deadline when we need to spend it, but it's not for a few years.
Right. Okay, so we'll have that money. If we go the restricted route, then it will qualify us for a potential match of some additional money that's become available. It's $25 million, but Ben feels like we probably would not qualify. So we have a choice, and there is a resolution in your packet. And Carly, do you want to talk a little bit more about this?
Yeah, so the recommended staff motion is to choose the standard allowance, in other words, the unrestricted option. And so that's what standard allowance means. And that way we can just use the funds kind of basically however we want. Otherwise, there are some restrictions on the funds, but we do need to make a declaration by the 30th. Otherwise, it will be restricted by default.
Ronnie?
Oh, well, so I had a few people who read this packet ask if I would ask, can we just once again offer, the, no offense to anyone, but the dumbed-down version of what trade-offs we're really being asked to choose between here, because it's not entirely clear what our options are if we go down path A versus path B. Like, I think we can all understand restricted, non-restricted, but it's a little bit confusing about what's on the restricted list and is the unrestricted list totally open, and yeah.
Yeah, so the restricted list is we'd have to spend on water, housing, sewer. I think there's another option of like telecommunications. That's some sort of kind of obscure programs that we wouldn't pursue anyway, so those are the main three. We'd have to spend it on, and basically we've identified those kinds of projects and we've applied for funding for them through this local match program that happened about a year ago, and we received money for Walnut Lane under that, which is great. So if we wanted to have the restricted funds, it'd be limited to basically, it would go to a water line, or some sort of housing project that we do. And also, the other benefit of having it restricted is we also might be eligible for this $25 million pot of funds. But if you recall, I think Ben mentioned there were about $1 billion in requests for $50 million originally, and then there'll probably be a similar amount of requests for now $25 million. So whether we'd be competitive, I just don't think it would be likely. So that is the benefit and risk of using the restricted non-entitlement unit funds. And what we would do now is the other option, which is what we recommend, is taking the standard allowance or the unrestricted funds and declaring them unrestricted. Now it means we can't get those, we won't be eligible for that grant money or that grant program, but we'd be able to basically use it as acting like it's a substitute for our lost revenue. And so it can go into the general fund, and there's a lot more flexibility. We can also spend it on water, housing, sewer, all the things, but also maybe for the kinds of programs, Ronnie, that you were talking about earlier.
Thanks. I think that just helps, sometimes repetition or different phrasing helps. Okay.
I'll make a motion to, on this. And I'd move to adopt Resolution 11-2022, a resolution dedicating the coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds to revenue replacement under the standard allowance.
I'll second.
Motion made by Jason, seconded by Tawny. Discussion, Jason?
No.
Tawny?
Not, Except that I think, given our current situation and the things that we would like to do sooner than later, I think this option makes much more sense.
Kaylin? Luke? Ronnie?
Sorry.
Any further discussion?
When we say unrestricted, is it completely unrestricted?
Well, I mean, we can't use it to bribe anybody or pay for a hit or those, it would be like general fund money.
So, yeah.
Yeah,
So we can buy chocolate.
unrestricted.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Well, as you know, I have a bone to pick with wanting to fund some of these groups, and I'm not saying it has to come from these funds, but I will bring that up and hope that if we can't find another way to help boost some of these other groups, and if it seems appropriate to use some of these funds to help with some of that impact, I will just again go on the record that I'm in favor of using some of that. Yeah.
Great.
Is there any reporting that we have to do in regard to it, Carmen?
Probably.
Okay.
Yeah, Ben knows better, but I'm sure, I mean, because we have to spend it by a certain time, those kinds of
Okay.
things. Yeah.
All right, motion made by Jason, seconded by Luke. How do you vote, Jason?
Oh, I seconded.
Oh, sorry, by Tawny, thanks. I was just looking at Luke, and so I just said his name.
Luke, you're messing us all
All
up
right,
tonight.
how do you vote, Jason?
Aye.
Tawny?
Aye.
Ronnie?
Aye.
Luke?
Aye.
Kaylin?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you. Next up, we have our engineer here, Chuck. Nice to see you. Couple items that are pretty much, should be pretty simple. One is the Pack Creek Nrcs Emergency Watershed Protection Task Order. That's first up. Basically, this is, this allows Chuck to move forward with producing documents so that we can move forward with this project. And it's cost share funds for flood damage that occurred at 500 West and 400 East. And there's a map in your packet that identifies those locations. So Chuck.
Yes, just for clarity, I had a couple of questions from council. There were originally 4 locations that we had submitted for. One of the locations was under Main Street in the UDOT right-of-way. And I've talked to UDOT, and they're not interested in participating with any money on it. And I then talked to the Nrcs, and they said we could use the rest of the money on the 3 sites that are in the city, not in the UDOT right-of-way. So that's how we kind of went from 4 sites to 3 sites. The 3 sites are the 500 West Bridge, and the 400 East Bridge over Pack Creek. And that's what this task order is for Hanson, Allen, and Lewis to do engineering, analysis, design, and permitting for construction dollars for debris removal and stream bank protection that was damaged during the floods of last year's July and August. The third site is the pedestrian bridge site by the Episcopal Church. And you'll recall we're already under design for that bridge. And we have awarded the design for the stream bank protection to the firm that's doing that design of the bridge. So rather than have 2 firms working on the same site, we put 1 firm, and that's moving along because that was a lesser amount. This amount is over the city manager's signing authority. So we're asking you today to allow us to approve this so that we can get Hanson, Allen, and Lewis underway to get the design and permitting done so that we can get to construction hopefully this year on these sites. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Kaylin.
So this is for design and related soft costs. So, and there's, you've applied for and been awarded funding.
Yeah.
Is that, so what is that funding for, and what is the city's, what's the match?
Sure. And we talked about it once before, but I was trying to pull it up here.
Okay, thank you for repeating yourself for my bad memory.
And I don't mind doing that. I just was, we are getting $300,000 from the Nrcs, of which 30,000 can be used for engineering, and the rest has to go to construction. We put in a 25% match, they pay for 75%. So our commitment is $82,000, which has been budgeted for in this year's budget and carried over into next year's budget according to Ben we've talked about.
Okay. And do you have any, I realize it's even before estimate of probable cost, but do you have a guesstimate of probable cost? And is it actually going to be that much, or is the city going to end up possibly paying more?
I honestly think now that we've taken the fourth site out of there, I think we're going to be okay.
Okay.
Because this program is only for, as you know, it's the Emergency Watershed Protection Act. And when we first contacted them, what they told us was, I said, can you replace this pedestrian bridge? And they're like, nope. This is for rock and dirt. This is for stream bank protection. So those costs, while they are significant, and construction costs have all gone up, but I think we're going to be fine with the fourth site going away, and Nrcs is okay with us using the total pot on the remaining 3 sites. I've asked them that question.
And then can the design include vegetative elements? Like dense willows along those areas instead of just like hard armoring?
We're going to try putting in some of that. I think we can put in like willow saplings, you know. I don't think they'll let us, when I had the discussion with Nrcs, they're like, oh, you know, if it makes sense, we're into restoring a healthy stream, so things like that they'll do, but they wouldn't let us go put in large-scale landscape potted plants and things like that.
No.
But other things like that, yeah, they are open to.
Yeah. Just to use maybe the riparian natural, like organic armoring as well as.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, for the natural stuff, they're good with that.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Chuck? I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve the attached Pack Creek Nrcs Emergency Watershed Protection Project Task Order with Hanson, Allen, and Luce, Inc. in the amount of $61,000 and authorize the mayor to sign it.
Second. Second by Tawny. Any further discussion, Kaylin? Tawny?
No, I had one question, and I don't even remember what it is, or what it was, but Chuck answered it.
Here's the numbers right there. I finally found them.
Thank you.
Jason? Sorry. Discussion.
No.
Ronnie?
Oh, Chuck, I realized I just had one other question on the shared document for you. And obviously, you know, we all know there are different magnitude floods expected over different, you know, decade periods. But so is there any way for us to remotely guess how many years or decades, you know, these improvements might last before?
Good question. The Nrcs policy is to determine the design flood. And what they've decided is that that's the design flood for this is the flood that caused the damage.
Okay.
And so that was about 1,500 CFS, which is estimated between the 5 and the 10 year, depending on which method you use.
Okay.
So it's about the 5-year level of protection. But it's to take it back to where it was before the flood.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks.
Anything else, Ronnie? Luke? All right. How do you vote, Kaylin?
Aye.
Tawny?
Aye.
Jason? Aye. Ronnie?
Aye.
Luke?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Next item, Tushar area sewer improvements in Birch Avenue Suro project task orders. Very similar to what you just approved, only we're talking about sewer improvements on Tushar Street and Birch. So questions, Chuck, go ahead.
Yeah, just very quickly, these are projects that were identified when council went through the sewer rate adjustments last year. And these are the 2 highest projects as part of the first bond program. There's a bond program in 2022-23 for $6.5 million. These 2, we met with OB and with our consultants, and we've agreed that these 2 are their highest needs for the projects and that they're part of the sanitary sewer master plan. So that's why we want to start with these 2. We'll be back to council with at least one other project, you know, once we get a better handle on construction costs. We hope to put these both out to bid at the same time and maybe get a better price. That's one reason we're designing them concurrently. Sort of the volume discount, perhaps it'll work, we're not sure in this context. But if council awards, we'll get right to work, and we're hoping to have Birch under construction this year, and then Tushar the following in the spring. Be happy to answer any questions.
All right, motion?
I'll make a motion. We've been talking about these for a long time, it seems like. I move to approve the Birch and Tushar area sewer improvement project task orders in the amount of $129,502 and $144,767 respectively, and authorize the mayor to sign the attached task orders.
Second.
Second.
All right, motion made by Tawny, seconded by Kalen. Further discussion, Tawny?
No.
Kalen?
Nope.
Luke?
I just had a quick question pop up. So since these have been identified as the highest priority needs, probably largely due to like their dated nature and like the erosion and everything, I've been made aware that there are a lot of connections coming off people's homes who are really outdated as well and are starting to need replacement. Are the properties that kind of connect to these lines likely to be in similar situations?
So the laterals is what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So we typically don't replace laterals as our projects, but we try and make everyone aware when we're underway on these projects that we're coming through. If you think your lateral's aged and dated, now's the time to probably talk to what we do is we can get them a better price if they use the contractor, but they don't have to. We're not saying they have to, but that's how it usually goes. Or they could have their own plumber come in, and then we would tie in, the contractor would tie in the lateral to those distribution lines. Right. These new mains. So now's the time to be looking at it for all these people along the Tushar or Birch Avenue.
Right. You answered my follow-up question, which is like if we're going to let people know that this is an opportunity to avoid them having to pay for digging up the road and all of that. So I will talk to some of my friends to start kind of knocking on doors.
Yeah, and as we go through, get closer like to 60% plans and that we have a handle on it. We work pretty closely with Lisa. We kind of now have the system where we'll put it out on social media. She'll advertise, hey, project coming to you soon. I mean, we've made that commitment to work with her closely. Carly's, working with us. So I think there'll be an opportunity for the residents along to know, and then they still a little bit of time for them to evaluate their lateral if they want to.
Is there an inexpensive way for them to decide if that lateral needs to be replaced or not? Or is it costly to just decide?
The surest way is to ask a plumber to come out and evaluate it for them. We have the ability, but to camera sewer lines, but we don't usually camera laterals because we've got to go into people's houses. And we do that sometimes. We try not to. So the best way would be to have, if you have concerns like your commode's backing up all the time or you're seeing stuff come out in your yard, it might be worth it to call a plumber and have him come out and evaluate it.
All right, any further discussion? Let me just go around. Ronnie? Jason?
Is this going to destroy the road? Or the road be?
They'll be trenched, the road will be trenched and then it'll be done. When it's done, it'll be, we'll use hot mix and we'll patch it. The same way we're going to do that with Mill Creek. The reason we haven't done that yet to Mill Creek is because we have to fall back and do all the connections to the services. It's a timing thing. We're aware. We're trying to get there to patch.
Kalen, do you have another question or comment?
So if we're restriping, can you put back in parking at that time? No, but seriously, following up on Luke's comment, I actually own a property in another town that's doing a similar project, and I'm adjacent to it, and they sent property owners, individual property owners letters rather than relying on social media.
Oh, that's doable.
Okay.
Yeah.
As in it will happen?
I think so.
Yeah,
there should be like a door knocking or like a flyer or a letter kind of, when we know the geographic area of folks who are impacted, it's really easy to do that kind of outreach.
That's right. It's when we know the limits of the boundary, then we can go in and get addresses and do that. So yeah, we'll do that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, make sure we do that. That would be great. I know that would solve a lot of people's problems if they were able to have the ability to do that. All right, motion made by Tawny, seconded by Kalen. How do you vote, Tawny?
Aye.
Oh, who seconded it? Did I say that wrong?
You have Tony that made the motion and Keelan seconded.
That's what I said, right? Oh, okay. Okay. How do you vote, Kaylin?
Aye.
Luke?
Aye.
Ronnie?
Aye.
Jason?
Aye.
All right, motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Chuck.
Thank you.
All right, our last item. Okay, this is Corey again. This is a proposed ordinance 2022-7, and it's amending the municipal code, and it's basically it's part of our sign ordinance, and Corey will go into this in a little more detail, but basically it's cleaning up the code, clarifying some language. There was a couple of recommendations by the Planning Commission that you can accept or not in your motion, and Corey will explain to us what that is.
All right, well, hello again, council, thanks so much. I'm going to share a screen, quickly move, I say that often, but I truly mean it. I'm going to quickly move through this presentation. And then we can talk about some of those maybe more complicated issues within what this ordinance approval would be. The general overview really is broken into those three parts. One is a relocation just of that sign code that exists in that Title 15, moving it to our zoning code. So just better articulating where it ought to be. That's for citizen readability as well as enforcement continuity. Relocation and incorporation of existing Title 17 sign sections that are spaced throughout that zoning code, but can be, again, now everything sign-wise consolidated into one chapter, that 1793. Part two is that amendment, which is really what the spurring action for this ordinance was, coming off of amendments from the Grand County ordinance, in particular with the LED and LCD display technologies, focusing on what those billboard display TV-like signs were. We had what I would consider sufficient language existing within our code already, but this amendment will create continuity between the jurisdictional codes, which will give us just a more complete valley-wide enforcement ability. In addition to that, we were going to take the opportunity, as we're looking into the sign code, to open up some of the clear discrepancies in some of the exempt, temporary, and prohibited signs, as well as code definitions, to tweak where we have issues with, again, enforcement. So having coordinated with Mona, Barry, and then myself within planning to make sure all these things are lining up. The part three was, again, a take off of existing signs, but the lack of language there. So when this was proposed to Planning Commission, it was really a clarification of language as the way it was presented. For City Council, I want to state that there is some new language there. It is a clarification. These signs exist in our community already because in a lapse or vacancy of code, interpretations have been made in the past. Sometimes it was approved, sometimes it was approved in a different way, excuse me. And then with one of those last pieces of language being a type of sign, which they exist in the community right now, but they're unregulated both in permitting and in enforcement because we need some direction from council here. So again, the background of where we've come to bring this before council is a city-initiated ordinance to really bring our development code, our land use code, up into compliance with other jurisdictions and what we're needing to do with MO's compliance. This is a more particular breakdown, so I'm going to breeze over this where we don't need to get into exact sections, but again, just a major relocation of that 1544 sign code into this new chapter, 1793, and then all those pieces within that 17 sign code. As a recommendation, the two options were to translate it directly across. Planning Commission had given the recommendation and the approval to incorporate. So we had multiple sections that said, for example, generally or general provisions. So we've consolidated those into one section, so we're not duplicating or deleting anything, we're consolidating. Again, more of a housekeeping item. What we see here is kind of a part 2 and 3. The subsection C, that electronic variable signs, EVMS, we're adjusting some of that language, really we're only adding one acronym, which is that LCD. We already had LED provisions. We already had some of these things, display technologies in our code, but this is what creates continuity between the two jurisdictions. This item B, that is an elaboration on what was an undefined use, and I think we had an opportunity to really regulate and rein it in so it is in compliance with our dark sky code as opposed to where it was undefined and there were no regulations on this. If we do decide to move forward with this recommended by Planning Commission, also staff recommended amendment, I might make an additional request that council consider where it has been a limited lumen output during the day of 70% capacity to what was here is 15%. I'm going to make the recommendation to a 10%, so a reduced even further nighttime lumen output capacity based on discussions I've had with the Yesco sign company and their, I guess, their manufacturing branch. So we actually have signs that we were able to test and see the lumen capacity at night. So where it was set previously at 20, which is a national standard, had been requested to be dropped down to 10, which I think is adequate. I think this is based off safety regulations for observation on road. So if it drops too low, you're creating safety conditions where the driver is going to have issues articulating the sign, and according to their studies, that's how they've described that. And if it's too bright, it's also creating safety hazards. So there is a sweet spot. It was suggested that that's between that 10 and 20, I think we take it down to 10. It was just shot to the middle there at 15. Again, moving on, we can certainly come back to that. Was this new and also additional component of subsection E there, which is a feather type sign? And just a really quick poll, head nods are sufficient. Is anyone familiar with what we're talking about when we talk about feather or blade type signs? Okay. Maybe not so much.
I just know there's a lot of confusion like on Planning Commission because like totally. Google showed different things than what I think was initially described to us.
That's right. And so the feather type, and it's described in the definition section so that we can articulate that with enforcement, but is basically a rigid or flexible type pole on which is usually curved and then a fabric type material. So you'll see those around town where the material or information is advertised in that spot. They're usually anchored by a insert so they can rotate like a wind vane to some degree. But what happens with this, kind of like flagging, is this, as it's unregulated, there can be an undetermined amount, and sometimes they're placed in the right-of-way, which they're not permitted to, placed on a section of property where we're not able to regulate that. So where we went with this is we're proposing that we prohibit these. I'm not sure if that's the appetite of the council. That was the determination from Planning Commission, is these are prohibited. And there are discussion points made by the Planning Commission on why we did that versus allowing them in certain contexts. So the one context in which they are allowed is attached to, and I think Kaylin had some last minute comments I didn't get back to you about, of what is a display apparatus. So that's existing sections of code, mostly about vendors or small commercial type, whether it be structures, carts, trucks, things that are typically non-traditional type commercial approved spaces. So the attachment of this is both a security option so that it's not blowing into the right-of-way, which has occurred in event scenarios, both with pop-up tents, these type sign displays, and other types. So we have already in our code the fact that we would allow additional signage such as this to be attached to the display apparatus being the food truck, tent, structure, whatever it is, moved on commercial structure. Those smaller commercial opportunities, we didn't want to rob those folks of the ability to advertise, and usually being smaller, you need a little bit more attention. That was the intention of Planning Commission versus a large multi-level structure commercial building. I don't think they need the same advertising some of these shacks do. So that was where we made a concession of it's appropriate here, maybe not so much. But again, these are two options for council to discuss. Everything else is really quite strictly housekeeping. The additional language here is to clarify, especially coming out of COVID, our leniency on open signs. So we've seen those open banner permits and now hiring permits, which are intended to be temporary, but we've seen them last for 3 years now, clearly not temporary. The purpose of this is if there is truly a sale or you're now hiring or now open, we should be able to allow that. So it's basically permitted with no cost to the owner or the business, but just so that we can regulate how long they're there, so that we don't have these open, dilapidated banner signs existing for 5-7 years. I know a cowboy hat company in Grand Junction's been going out of business now for 15 years and still hasn't sold one. So, political sign campaigns, similar housekeeping is that we are no longer going to charge a fee for these, but just process them through. So very simple there. This was the general definition update for those feather signs. I'm going to conclude there. I do have the actual ordinance with the red lines if we wanted to dive in, but I'll leave it there and open up for the mayor in discussion.
Questions? Kalen?
So some legacy language states, lighted signs in residential zones must be indirect and no more than 25 watts total. And so it seems like given our evolution of light regulation, that specifying that in terms of lumens, could you suggest would you agree, and can you suggest an amendment that we might make?
I would there's two options. We can either make that amendment tonight, or this is coming on a little bit of the backside of this ordinance where we are adjusting some of the dark sky, but we are now currently drafting a dark sky, what will be our outdoor lighting ordinance update. So with IDA and our certification compliance, there are a number of amendments along with that. So that would be one of those things that we would have included as our overall outdoor lighting or dark sky ordinance update. Much of which with this new update is intended to also include signs. So we'll be revisiting some of these provisions just like that and kind of restructuring those. So either of those options, we can either fix at that point or make an amendment to adjust that now and then fix it however the dark sky ordinance might require at that time.
I'm okay waiting.
Okay, that from when I got your comment, that was, I think my initial reaction was, I think if we wait, we can handle it more completely in those updates.
And then maybe related, there's another statement, lighted signs on property near a residential area shall be subdued and shall not be allowed to penetrate beyond the property in such a manner as to annoy or interfere with nearby residential properties. Do you anticipate being able to enforce this?
We, between Barry Ellison, our building official, Mona, and I, we actually had a discussion about that dark sky or outdoor lighting ordinance that we're going to be reviewing, and there's a lot of language about enforceability that we're discussing implementing. I think this was an attempt as a part of that language to give us some teeth that while there are lights that may be compliant, they may be nuisance, which is not the correct term because that is a technical legal term. So we're trying to decipher where in the code we can process these very things, so that annoyance type. So that would be something that we're
then I'll
tackling
just,
as well.
Hold off on any further analysis of that. I'm wondering if permitted, I'm sorry, there was the qualifying language about the feather signs is a permitted display apparatus. And is that term sufficiently defined in the code that you feel like it'll be clear to?
I would say it's functionally defined, and mostly through our what I'm going to, off the top of my head, believe is our Title V, mostly through our building permits and licenses code. So it's not even in our building or zoning, but is mostly organized around those vendor type merchant licenses. That display apparatus is a what I might not call a defined term in the way that we have a definition section, but it is a recognized term that whatever it is that you're selling out of, that's what it must be attached to. So the feather type sign is attached to your display apparatus, which will be so for example, a food truck, you can advertise by painting your truck, but you cannot have any other signs other than an approved feather sign or sandwich board that is attached so that it does not go into the right-of-way.
Okay, as long as you're clear on it. Thank you for your work on this. It looks good.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Just more technical, since I've already voted on this in Planning Commission, I can't on this, right?
You have to recuse yourself.
Okay.
All
Just
right.
want to make sure.
Any other questions for Corey?
No, but this is a lot of information on signs. I don't know who spent all this time up at 3 o'clock in the morning.
That's why we have Corey.
I know.
Right.
He has a baby that keeps him up at night.
And you can see the blinking of the lights. He's like, you.
All right, I'll entertain a motion.
Not even sure how to look it.
It's,
I'm looking here.
I move to approve ordinance number 2022-07, amending section 17.93.07B to make the brightness during nighttime hours 10% rather than 15%.
Good job. I'll second that.
so is that enough, Corey?
That is, I apologize for not having that recommended action item. I think this was coming off of the previous items that didn't have that. So that works. That is the information I need to make the amendment I need in approving everything else intact.
Okay.
And all those red lines are included in, all those redlined additions are included in that ordinance, right?
Correct. So
Okay.
the clean ordinance wouldn't have made sense because we're housekeeping more or less. So when we go to codify that, they're going to be adjusting on everything like that. So the new materials that we talked about, feather, those will be the new ads. Everything else is just kind of reorganizing. So the red line is what the governing document will be.
Yep, gotcha.
With the 10% that you just
Correct.
recommended. All right, motion made by Kalen. Second?
Seconded by
Oh, okay, sorry. You guys went backwards this time, you confused me. All right. Any further discussion, Kalen?
Thank you for addressing feather signs.
Yeah.
Connie?
I agree. No.
Luke? Oh, sorry. Are you done?
No, no more discussion.
Okay.
No.
Luke? Ronnie?
I'm excited to be consistent with the county.
Yeah. Jason?
No.
All right, how do you vote, Kalen?
Aye.
Tawny?
Aye.
Luke?
Recuse.
Oh, sorry. Yes. I'm like kind of, I don't know, it's only 8 o'clock. I don't know what happened. Ronnie?
Aye.
Jason? Aye. All right, motion passes 4-0 with Luke recusing himself as a former planning commission member.
Thank you, council.
All righty, thank you, Corey.
Thank you for all your work.
All right. Do you want to mention, before you leave, the Supreme Court ruling on the billboards?
I'm not sure I'm familiar with the update on that.
Familiar with that,
I'm
Carter?
not well enough. There were like a lot of double negatives in the decision that were
Well,
confusing.
apparently, the Supreme Court approved municipalities and local entities to not allow digital lighting on billboards.
Especially if we had allowed digital lighting on on-site billboards versus off-site billboards. And I think there was a disagreement that it was kind of arbitrary that we would allow on-site but not off-site. And I think the Supreme Court said we're allowed to make those kinds of distinctions.
Where I think the state in the past kind of prohibited us from doing that. So
Or has
it
tried to
got
do that.
appealed, and so now we have the authority, which is good news, I think, unless it's not. But it looked good to me. All right, thanks, Corey. All right, Carly.
Yeah, all right. I have sort of a lengthy update here. We have a few staff updates that are really exciting. We're almost fully staffed, except for the police department, which will take some time, and of course, sustainability and our housing specialist. But just as an update, we have 2 new officers that are actually returning officers at the department, Sergeant Woodard and Officer Allred. So they are returning back to town, and we've hired both of them, so it's great that we're getting closer to being better staffed. And of course, Jared starts May 9th, so that's pretty heartening. We also have some new faces in the rec department. Alex Mudler is our new associate sports director, and Anthony Spiker is our new recreation assistant. So it's great that so basically Alex is taking Rhett's position, if you can contemplate who that was. Some public engagement announcements. The most prominent thing that's going to be happening in the next couple of weeks is the downtown dispersed parking demonstration area. So the striping for this area on 100 East between 100 North and Center Street will be completed by about May 3rd, so next week. And we'll start meeting with the property owners and businesses about this project on May 4th. And of course, there'll be a public open house in June, and we'll just announce that as that date approaches. Yeah,
I think as a council member, I just had a question. So I saw in Lisa's information that there is the meeting for the impacted residents. Is that something that we're encouraged as council members to go to, or just for residents?
Welcome to.
I just didn't know when I saw it.
Of course, you're encouraged. That would be actually great for you to attend if you're interested.
I have to tell you a funny story about
Yes.
it. I got a phone call today about the strike. I mean, this lady was just mad.
Not happy.
Angry. And I just got to say, ma'am, that's not a county project. You don't need to call the city.
Call the city. I see.
She didn't know she was talking to the city.
No.
You didn't give her your cell number, huh?
Need to know that.
And you just outed yourself on YouTube.
No.
It's really satisfying when you can do that. I just got the wrong number. We also have some exciting events coming up. The Arts and Ag Market begins next Thursday, May 5th at Swanee Park. It starts at 5 and goes to 8. And those will be held every first and third Thursday through October. And finally, we're hosting a few events for Public Works Week, which is the week of May 16th. And we have some events at the elementary school, and we're going to have like a barbecue and a meet and greet, and we'll just give more information about those events for our Public Works crews. And hopefully the community will be able to come out and just sort of meet who kind of runs their Public Works team. And then on that note, I have another Public Works kind of announcement. Summer is going to be providing you more detailed information about this item that I'm going to raise because she's required to by city code. We made an emergency procurement under our procurement policy for a failed motor at well 10. And our procurement policy allows me and Summer to make a determination to bypass a lot of procurement rules if there's like a threat to public health, safety, or welfare, and as long as we can get a competitive bid or a competitive proposal. So our well 10 went down in March, and that's concerning because we only have 2 culinary wells and then we have some springs. We cannot run our system completely on springs, so if the other well had gone down, we wouldn't be able to provide adequate culinary water or fire flow. So it's an emergency situation because the submersible motor had died out, so we tried to procure one as quickly as possible. It took us, we didn't get a bid until, so it failed March 8th. We went out to bid immediately, didn't get a bid until I think April 15th. So as soon as that happened, we just sort of signed the agreement. It was for a competitive amount. They were able to start work within a week, which was today, and then they are supposed to be done by tomorrow. So we are back up and running, basically, but it just demonstrates the importance of redundancy in our system, and I know we're investing a lot of money into that. But wanted to make you aware, and yeah, from us, so you can see the paperwork and everything. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Jason. Oh, council reports. Jason.
What I do?
What do you think? Oh, Jason. You have to go to the principal's office.
Pretty quiet. I did attend the Utah League of Cities and Towns convention in St. George last week. I learned a ton of stuff at that. It was, it was only, about 2 days, but a lot of good meetings, met a lot of people. The two things that everybody talked about was housing and water, whereas everybody talking about, and yeah, it was good. It was very worthwhile. And that's about all I have.
Thanks.
I'm just curious, since not many of us went this time, were there any workshops that stood out for you? Yeah.
There was some good workshops, some council to council kind of workshops that I attended, and then I attended, trying to look at my notes of, the resort caucus, was really good, and a lot of water issues, and I feel like, you know, and then talking about law enforcement, you know, and how everybody is having issues with law enforcement, you know, and being in some of these meetings where a lot of people from Wasatch Front where they're like, you need to quit stealing our employee, you know, everybody just kind of bids up people, you know, and stuff. And, you know, and the U of U just is now hiring officers at $45 per hour, you know, and it's trickling down across everything, you know, and stuff. And so everybody's having these issues that we've been talking about. We're not alone. And then it was good going with Ben. Ben's like, you know, he knows everybody there. He's like a social butterfly. But it was great because he like introduced me to like the Springdale mayor. Had a good conversation with her, and they, you know, she talked a lot about housing and how they're kind of similar to us and having a lot of the same problems that we're having, you know, and you know, and yeah, so it was good, you know.
Good.
Thanks, yeah.
The next one is in November, up in Salt Lake. So hopefully, I plan to go to that, so hopefully other council members will be able to attend that one as well. Ronnie?
Hi, okay. I got my second shingle shot, and I've been having some aches and headaches, and my brain is not totally screwed on, so I apologize. I'm not more prepared for a report that will make a lot of sense. But let's see, on April 14th, I attended the Southeast Utah Riparian Partnership meeting. We got to meet down at Big Sandy, which is, I think, where everybody should have their meetings. And among just some of the takeaways for us as the city are, we are a signatory onto their MOU, and they've been in the process of revamping it. It always takes a long time to like get Department of Energy at UMTRA to do their part with it. So I think we're getting closer to sign, but just a heads up for Carly that at some point we have to sign the new one. For those of you who don't know, the Riparian Partnership used to be called the Tamarisk Coalition, a whole group of different agencies, BLM, Park Service, Department of Natural Resources, kind of anybody and everybody who's doing riparian restoration, research, monitoring along the river, the university, rim-to-rim restoration. And so a lot of reports on different projects people are working on, more that I can get into now, but I had mentioned once before from one of our last meetings that Park Service did a presentation about the national kind of messaging called Play, Clean, Go. It's kind of related to the Leave No Trace messaging, but this is specific to the transport of non-native species. So think, you know, like seeds that you pick up on your shoes, you know, taking your goat heads over to Colorado, or can be animal species as well. So anyway, there is a whole national campaign about educating people about the need to wipe off and clean off, you know, themselves and their gear and their pets before you head back in the car and head to your next destination. So at some point here, Park Service will be coming to us to talk to us about how we can help from our end about education, about that campaign. I'm thinking one of the things that's easy to do that people do is install boot brushes when you've been on a site and you just wipe your shoes off before you get in the car. And so maybe there's some signage and things we could do, say on the parkway, since we don't have a lot of other trailer parks, public land issues right in the city limits. Lots of discussion about non-native species and things that are being done. I don't know how many of you know, aside from our little friend, the tamarisk beetle, we also do biological releases of wasp to control knapweed. So anyway, in all your spare time, you can go look that little guy up. Some interesting just things that I thought that got brought up is Tim Graham, you know, our guru on the tamarisk beetle, was raising some interesting questions that I think need more delving into, but saying, you know, he would like to know more about when we do take down the tamarisk, you know, the comparative benefits of burning, because we do tend to do a certain number of controlled burns to the piles, but the comparative benefits of doing that versus leaving them as habitat, and so how much of a fire risk it would be to leave them there. So some interesting questions to think about. And as ever, Grand County Weed Department continues to do good education in the community about things we can all do to get things get rid of things like Ravenna grass in our yards. And for those of you who try to monitor cheatgrass, there is a new little nasty to look out for, the schismus grass, which someone helped me identify, and there's some growing out in front of Moonflower. If you want to take a walk down there, I'll show you what it is. But I noticed I had a few that had moved into my yard. Oh, so something else for us to learn to eradicate. Let's see, on the 15th of April, I was invited to a community info party for the campaign of Utah legislature candidate for our district. We've recalled that we've been redistricted, so Carl Albrecht will no longer represent us. So the new seat that we'll be voting to fill will be a race between, now I'm going to forget Lyman's first name. Is it Phil Lyman? Phil Lyman and Davina Smith. So anyway, this was an opportunity to meet with Davina Smith. If anyone's interested, I definitely recommend checking her out. She seems very family education oriented, is from San Juan County, and is very, very interested in learning about the needs and interests of Grand County voters. We had a System of Care Regional Advisory Committee meeting on April 20th. They do still have capacity to help more families in our area, so any questions about that, let me know. I have put on my reminder list when the new chief comes to town, we would like to connect them with him just so he kind of understands the role of everybody on that committee and so that they can make a connection. On the 21st of April, UMTRA offered a tour. Not of all of the sites, but a well-field tour, which takes you down to the area closer to the river where they're doing both restoration of that area, but that is also where the pumps are, where they bring in some river water to help the process of groundwater remediation. So that was very interesting. And just as a reminder to people, I guess there was a time when the UMTRA project, they tell me they were doing like weekly tours for the community and school kids would come down and things got a little complicated around COVID, but they're open to tours again. So if anybody is interested, the contact is Barbara Michelle, and you can always contact me. I'll get you her information if you're interested in tours, because it's actually quite fascinating. Let's see, and the other thing was today the mayor and I attended the quarterly meeting for the UMTRA Moab Tailings Project Steering Committee, and some of the exciting things out of there were we had reported, I think at a last meeting, that we had gotten to the point with the lobbying where the project was getting about $45 million, and we had managed to get $67 million this year. So they're going through the process of trying to attain some new equipment and rail cars to help with that, but like everything, there's some supply chain issues. They are on track to move another 1 million tons of tailings this year, and about halfway there so far. They're about 90% through the process of designing the eventual cover that will go on the site at Crescent Junction. We're about 4 years out from having all the tailings moved. And of course, we always like to remind people once all the tailings are moved, there's still more groundwater remediation that's to continue to happen in kind of site closure. But everybody seems to be very excited about entering the site closure phase and discussing what's that going to mean. So we had some discussion about meetings that are going on with a part of Department of Energy called Legacy Management that deals with this part of things, and Joe and the mayor and Mary McGann and I are going to Grand Junction to the War Room where they discuss their planning for site closure, to have some discussions about things we need to think about with that. So that's cool. I know some of you are excited about the Canyonlands Backcountry Horsemen signs that we've been trying to get set up on the UMTRA site. So as the wheels turn so slowly with the feds, we might see those signs going up, like the metal cutout signs they have in Green River in May or June. And let's see. That might be the bulk of it, other than I think a lot of us look at the tailings pile and we think, tailings, and that's kind of all we think about. But the restoration that's going on closer to the river is actually a very cool thing. So I do recommend touring that if you can. But there's also just a very exciting partnership that's occurring between Department of Energy, staff and the Department of Natural Resources. So, they have exchanged seed, they're down there taking out tamarisk, and the goal at the site is really to restore it back to a native state when the project is done. So it's kind of fun to see that side of things. I think that's it.
Thank you, Ronnie. Luke?
Yeah, not too many things, but I was able to attend the local homeless council on the 13th, kind of based on the community information. There are 146 individuals who are enrolled in either housing or homelessness services, 88 of which are literally homeless during the reporting period, or were at least, so meaning that they're living in a place not meant for human habitation. Three most prominent intersections for those individuals was mental illness, domestic violence, and substance use disorder. The LHC is currently looking for any community members with graphic design experience that might want to volunteer for some social media outreach for them. Amanda Nill from the school district informed everybody there that they have been made aware of funding for students who are homeless. So if anybody's aware of any Grand County School District students who are actively homeless right now, reach out to the school district. There might be some funding that can help house them if they can find housing, obviously. The Free Health Clinic talked about ongoing discussions regarding how their new location will end up filling out. There was some talk of potentially creating a day center within there and bringing in a bunch of the nonprofits to kind of make it a one-stop shop for people looking for services so they don't get bounced around from system to system. USARA is having bowling on the last Thursday of every month. The Housing Authority, all of their apartments are currently at capacity. They still do have 2 veteran housing vouchers available for any veterans in our community that are looking for housing or assistance with paying for housing. An unfortunate piece of news that we received from the state is that the state mental hospital is currently not accepting any new adults, and reserved beds for each county have been lowered from 2 to 1 as they are down approximately 100 or so psych techs and can't find any new staff. Four Corners is looking to have its new building completed by June 11th. The Community Land Trust won't be accepting applications for multifamily apartments until likely sometime next year, as the Housing Authority is currently applying for low-income housing tax credits. And then the Multicultural Center has Project Soul up and running. As of, I believe, a couple of days ago, 18 people have already accessed the service. For those that aren't aware of it, Project Soul is an acronym for Safe Outdoor Living, and so it's providing resources to individuals who currently don't have traditional housing available to them to make living out of your vehicle or camping a little safer. They are currently low on sleeping bags, sleeping pads, headlamps, lanterns, and 2-burner camp stoves. So if anybody has any new or gently used items that kind of fall into those categories, they are looking for donations. That kind of covers that. And then I had a pretty productive meeting with Ben Carley and the mayor regarding some of the different ways in which we can help support our nonprofit community that I'm really excited about kind of exploring a little bit further. And then provided the city feedback that I got from my meeting with Sea Haven about some of the really positive relationships that they have in some areas in which they believe some conversations can be had to better unite our service delivery in the community.
Thanks, Luke. Kaylin?
I attended the City-County Collaboration Committee meeting, C4. It's a short agenda. We discussed the dispersed parking demo, and it seemed like we talked about it for a while. I got the impression that maybe the county wasn't fully clear on the process that had happened leading up to it, like the whole hotspot version 2, and as well as what the design was. Hopefully, part of the demo project will be demoing communication with the affected people on the street. I had some back and forth with Chuck about I noticed that some of the parking stalls were on someone's driveway in the design drawing that we had, and so hopefully that was corrected and shared with the county and the other neighbors on that street before it actually happens. And we also talked about noise ordinance collaboration for whatever the next phase of that is, and it seems like that will be a work in progress. I attended a boat ramp open house for the across the pedestrian bridge, that boat ramp, and it seems like the Park Service is engaged on design. They have staff from the Salt Lake office who do community engagement and design work, and so that's kind of exciting. And it seemed like seemed reasonably well attended, and it's good for them to get feedback from everyone about how they use it, because it does get used in ways other than just launching boats. It's really kind of a nice community asset over there, and potentially can provide river access close to town for a variety of users in a way that's better than it does now. I attended a solid waste special service district board meeting, and we talked about various district-y stuff, doing a pay scale development, bringing in a double wide for more office space, procuring better billing and tracking software, which will make things more efficient and hopefully ease communications with customers, especially the city. And the biggest news there is that our executive director, Evan Turrell, is resigning. So we are recruiting a new one. And so if you know of anyone with experience in solid waste, hauling, landfills, and generally management of a 40-person organization, we're looking for either an interim or permanent ED. That's what I've got.
Thank you, Kaylin. Tawny.
Okay, I attended a Canyonlands Healthcare Special Service District meeting, and after a door fiasco, we got into the room and everything was okay. The staff over there is really doing a great job of taking care of those people and keeping them COVID-free. At that meeting, we also saw the free clinics presentation that they gave to us. And we decided that this nursing home was the place that you needed to go if you want to live to be over 100. Over 10% of the residents at the care center are over 100. I met with the mayor and Mary McGann and Evan McMullen as he came through town. That was interesting. I didn't realize I was meeting such a controversial person, but it was fun. He and his wife knew nothing about the tailings pile, so Joette did a really good job about educating them and explaining the history, and they were just amazed. And we were amazed that they'd never heard about it. And I attended the museum meeting the evening after I had my second COVID booster, and I got really tired and really sore. But we had our meeting at the new storage facility that the museum bought at the Moab Business Park, and we're kind of given a tour about and shown the plans for the museum and the plans to archive some of our more delicate artifacts and just keep them in pristine condition and safe. And the staff at the museum has really stepped up the operation of the museum. In the storage facility, there will be a hermetically sealed, climate-controlled vault for the things that have to be at a certain temperature and a certain humidity. That's a long time coming. It's just, it will just take time, but we were able to purchase that property as soon as it came on the market. And I think that is it.
Thank you, Tawny. So for me, I attended the first C3 meeting, which is the city, the county, and San Juan County. It was very informative. If any council members are interested in participating in that meeting with me, let me know. Kaylin's willing to do it, but we thought it might be good to open it up to others, so you can hear what's going on. I think it's important for us to understand that I know our issues with San Juan County are development and planning down in South Spanish Valley, but their issues are a lot different than ours, and that was really apparent in that meeting. You know, for example, they have they need a repeater up on Bald Mesa so that they can get free TV down there because they don't have access to cable. And so, you know, just simple things that to us are like, oh, really? You know, we take for granted. In San Juan County, it's a whole different thing. So I think I really appreciated Mac McDonald's candor with us, and I look forward to those continued meetings. Just for your information, I attended the Rocky Mountaineer ribbon cutting where we all had to go out and wave as the train came by. That was pretty interesting. And John Curtis, Representative John Curtis, will be in town next Wednesday. There's a dinner being planned at El Chorro Loco if anybody's interested in attending that meeting, so you can sit and personally meet with Representative Curtis. Let Carly know, and then we'll follow. If you could let her know by Thursday, and we can follow up with Mary McGann and let Mary know that and anybody can come. This is, you know, it doesn't need to just be two. It could be as many council members that want to attend. And he's also then going to have a town hall at Star Hall at 7:30. I will be out the week of May 9th through the 13th, and so Tawny will be acting as the mayor pro tem and participating in the pre-council meetings and the agenda prep. And then lastly, I just would like to pay my personal respects to Senator Orrin Hatch, who passed away this week, I think over the weekend. I worked really closely with him and Senator Bennett when I was on the county working to get the UMTRA project moved, to make the decision to move that. And I'll never forget, he called me up personally to say, I wanted to be the first one to tell you that we decided to move that pile away from the Colorado River. So he will be missed. He was a great senator for our state. And that's all I have.
I promise I won't make any executive decisions while you're gone.
All right, anything else?
One quick question. So 5 o'clock, could I have been here?
You could have, but we went right into closed session.
It just went right into closed
Yeah,
session. But
so.
I could have been here until it went to close.
Yep, you could have been here.
Was there any minutes before that?
There are, but it's basically, we're going into closed session. So there'll be more about that, Joe. We'll be talking more about that in the future. Yeah, so.
You know, when I was reading that, I was like, well, I should have been here at 5. It looks like it takes one bit.
Yeah. So more to come on that.
Yes.
You're always late, you wouldn't have been here.
You're right.
So with that said, we are not going into another closed session, which is on the agenda. We took care of that earlier, and so motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, we're done. Thanks, everybody.